E-bikes are such an amazing invention that have completely revolutionized cycling and opened up the opportunity for so many more people to ride bicycles. But they've also created trail conflicts, overcrowding at trailheads, and even illegal trail use. And worst of all, they're threatening the closure of trails across the United States. And even though e-bikes are seemingly everywhere, they're currently perceived as the snowboarder that skiers completely despised in the 80s and 90s.
If one of these skateboards or ski boards, whatever they're called, hit a person, they'd break their leg because they're just like a missile.
And if you're shopping for an e-bike, there's a lot of things that your local bike shop might not be telling you. So today I'm going to dig into some of the things you should keep in mind whether you already own an e-bike, whether you're thinking about getting an e-bike, or if you completely despise them and wish they had never been invented. But before we start, in typical YouTube fashion, it would mean so much to me if you smash the like button down below to help out with that YouTube algorithm. Just one like helps my channel out tremendously by promoting this video to a whole new audience that could really benefit from this information. So thank you guys for doing that, and with that said, let's get to it. Let's start this video off with some of the downsides of e-bikes, or the cons, if you will, or as some of you might be thinking right now,
the reasons I hate them.
And then I'm going to talk about some of the really great upsides to e-bikes, and at the end of the video I'm going to talk about some coming legislation that you have to know about if you're thinking about buying an e-bike, so stick around for that. Now, one of the biggest downsides to e-bikes, and specifically e-mountain bikes, is the lack of trail access. Depending on where you live, e-bikes may or may not even be legal to ride on the trails that you have. And while I don't think e-bikes do any more harm to trails than a regular mountain bike, trail access is something we all need to be protective of. The biggest threat to mountain biking is giving those anti-bike groups talking points as to why they should close down trails to bike access. And there's lots of confusion as to where e-bikes can and can't be ridden. In addition to this, a lot of bike shops aren't 100% truthful as to where you can ride those e-bikes because they want you to buy them. So unfortunately, it takes a little bit of research for you to find out where you can and can't ride these. The easiest way for most people to find out which trails they can and can't ride on an e-bike is to go onto the Trailforks website, which is trailforks.com, click on the Browse by Map feature, and then hover over the activity type and select e-bike. That will show you which trails are truly legal for e-bikes to ride on in your area. The second downside that you really need to take into consideration before buying an e-bike is that they're incredibly heavy. And believe it or not, this is actually more of an issue for when you're transporting your bike than it is for when you're riding your bike. And the biggest challenge with this is that most bike racks over a couple years old aren't rated to carry the weight of an e-bike on them. And even now, you really need to buy the top of the line bike rack that's capable of carrying these heavy e-bikes. In addition to that, they're just hard to lift up onto a bike rack. So if you have any problem lifting 50 or 60 pounds, keep that in mind if you plan to transport your bike to trailheads. On top of that, roof racks are pretty much a complete no-go. Another consideration is that e-bikes are inherently going to be incredibly more expensive than the comparable traditional pedal mountain bike. Technology of motors and batteries and electronics is so new to the bicycle industry that the cost is still substantially higher than the mechanical alternative. Another downside to e-bikes is that when that battery dies, you are done. They are so heavy that when that battery dies and the motor's not assisting you, they're incredibly hard to pedal, especially uphill. And last but not least, if you have any friends that ride traditional mountain bikes, they're not going to ride with you anymore. Like I said earlier, most traditional mountain bikers think that e-bikes are cheating or they're basically the same as a motorcycle. So they're probably going to disown you, but even if they don't, they're not going to be able to keep up with you if they're on a pedal bike and you're on an e-bike. So this is something to really take into consideration because I have friends who now ride e-bikes that I just can't ride with because I can't keep up with them. But with all those downsides to e-bikes, there's also some really great pros to them. Whether you're older and you just don't have the strength and stamina to jump straight onto a normal mountain bike, or you have asthma or knee problems or any ailments that keep you from being able to ride a traditional mountain bike, e-bikes will open up those gates and allow you to enjoy the sport of mountain biking. It's great. And this is where traditional old school mountain bikers get all butthurt and say things like,
If it's too tough for you, maybe you should just find a new hobby.
disregard those people, flick them aside like a booger, and don't worry about it. Another really great benefit to e-bikes is that you can cover a greater distance in a shorter amount of time. And I personally really like this one because as a working professional with kids, a full-time job, and this YouTube hobby on the side, I have very limited amount of time for riding. So by having an e-bike, it allows you to get out there, cover 20 or 30 miles in an hour and a half or 2 hours, whereas on a normal mountain bike, that might take you 3, 4, 5 hours to get that same amount of riding in. Now, the haters are going to say, yeah, you're not going to get the same workout you'd get on that traditional bike. And that's true. But at least you're getting to have that same experience that you would have on a traditional mountain bike and condense it into a shorter period of time, which is a total benefit in my eyes. And another great benefit to e-bikes is that you still get a phenomenal workout. And I've ridden traditional bikes my whole life, but I've ridden e-bikes too, and I can tell you for a fact, you can still get a great workout on an e-bike. The nice thing about e-bikes is that you can really custom tune that workout, whether you just want to go for an easy recovery ride or you want to get a very strenuous ride. You can tune the motor to get the workout that you want on that day. And another intrinsic benefit of e-bikes is that the additional weight really improves the handling and ride characteristics of mountain bikes. For decades, the bike industry has focused all their efforts on reducing the weight of bicycles, which makes a ton of sense if your main focus is climbing up mountains, but it's come at the expense of handling characteristics. And now over the last 5 years, we've seen mountain bikes actually get a little bit heavier each year, as we've seen the benefits of better suspension, aluminum wheels, and things like that help the handling characteristics of those bikes. So by having that extra weight, e-bikes actually have better ride characteristics than a lot of traditional mountain bikes. So some of you watching this video might be thinking, yeah, I might get an e-bike. And if you are, you really need to listen to this next part. This is critical. The social spending bill that the government's working on passing now, called the Build Back Better bill, has a lot of climate initiatives built into it, but one thing that hasn't really been talked about is the E-Bike Act. And while I haven't seen the final text of this bill yet, I do know that there are plans to have a tax credit for e-bikes up to 30% of the value of your e-bike. The proposed subsidy in this bill would be capped at $1,500 and would be limited to e-bikes under $8,000. It would also be fully refundable, meaning tax filers who don't owe any taxes would still get that money back. And this tax credit is only authorized until 2026, so there will be a 4-year period where this tax credit is available for people buying e-bikes. So my best advice for you if you're thinking about getting an e-bike is to wait until this legislation gets pushed through, see what the wording is, see if you can get this tax credit, and save yourself some money. So like I mentioned, e-bikes have been a pretty contentious topic. People are on one side of the aisle or the other. It's pretty divided. And I'm not here to preach to you whether or not e-bikes are good or bad, but if you're thinking about buying an e-bike, some of these things really need to be taken into consideration, especially the tax credit, but also really pay attention to your trail access. And I will say that it's important to remember that we're all bike riders. We're all out there to enjoy being out in the woods, being out on the trails. So be nice to your fellow trail users. Hope to see you out on the trails. Peace.